We are so excited to have Quach here this morning. She is an inspiring social entrepreneur and the author of Calm Clarity: How to Use Science to Rewire Your Brain for Greater Wisdom, Fulfillment, and Joy, which is one of Fast Company's best business books in 2018. Her social enterprise, also named Calm Clarity, uses neuroscience and mindfulness to guide organizations and individuals to address unconscious bias, to lead with authenticity, and to foster genuine inclusion, healing, and integration. What you should also know about Zwei is that she wrote an autobiographical essay, Poor and Traumatized, at Harvard, which became a viral sensation and led her to collaborate with other student leaders to start a grassroots organization called the Collective Success Network, which mentors, supports, and empowers low-income first-generation college students to help them successfully navigate college and get started in their careers. We're really excited and delighted to have Zwei Quach with us here this morning. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Great. So I was invited to talk today on the topic of stress and was given freedom to do whatever I wanted with this theme. And so I'd like to try to help you understand the importance of addressing stress from a structural and social justice perspective. So, and this is tied in with many of the things that have been causing us stress since mid-March, which is seeing that there has been so much disparities in health in terms of how the pandemic, how COVID-19 has been affecting different populations, and also the Black Lives Matter movement and how racial injustice also causes a great deal of stress, especially stress related to race-based trauma. And so I wanted to start by asking a poll question. And we had asked you, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you describe your stress level since mid-March? And fortunately, many people seem to be resilient and have rated themselves at medium. I don't see anyone picking very low or low, which makes sense given the unusual levels of stressors that we've been facing. And so overall, it makes sense that most people chose medium or higher. And we have a number of people who selected very high. And it could be that the conditions, the financial stress, the uncertainty has made most of your coping mechanisms not as beneficial as they were in other times. And so there is a need to better understand how to deal with what I would call toxic stress that's so high that most of our normal coping mechanisms are not as effective. And so I will try to talk about these topics as we go into the talk. So first, I want to make this a bit interactive and ask you a number of questions. But before we start, I wanted to talk more about this concept of mind hacking, which informs my approach to stress and other mental health challenges. I call my book A Mind Hacker's Guide to Shifting into Brain 3.0, and I'm going to explain more what Brain 3.0 is. First, I think I need to define what mind hacking is. And so in my book, this is not a common word, so this is how I define it. It means using science to enhance the best parts of being human by proactively steering brain development in a way that physiologically supports greater physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being, alignment, and integration. So as you can see, it's not just about making your neurons work a certain way, but it's about tying it to the experience of being human in a more holistic manner. And so I would like to ask you a few questions about how does a crisis affect your nervous system? So the first question is, what does your body feel? So please feel free to use the chat to describe sensations you feel in your body. And we're going to talk about emotions and the mental impact later, but now focus on the physical sensations. What is it that you feel? I can't find my chat box.
So if you want, I can read some of the things that people are typing.
Yeah, I'm not sure why my chat box disappeared. I can't find it.
We have tightens in my chest, tired, exhausted, brain won't turn off, physical stiffness from lack of physical exercise, breaking out in hives, more tightness in chest, racing heart, shallow breathing, trouble sleeping. Shall I go on?
uh, yeah, I found my chat box now. So
Okay.
nauseated, anxiety, restlessness. So just to explain a little bit more about what's happening. So many people talk about tension, restlessness, and difficulty relaxing or sleeping. And so why does this happen? So blood is redirected from all your organs to flee or flight. And the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs all your rest and digest systems, turns off. That's why it gets harder to rest and digest. And that's pretty straightforward, but I think it's something that most people don't realize is that the stress system is turning off your ability to relax and sleep. Now, I want to ask you about your emotions. What emotions arise when you're under a crisis? So I see feeling drained, anxiety, depression, fear, sadness, anger, numbness, frustration, worried, frustration and numbness, worry. So as you can see, there's some universal feelings that come with it. And so most people report feeling overwhelmed, fearful, anxious. And another word is disconnected. You feel isolated, you feel alone. Even though everyone else is going through the same thing, it feels like you might be the only one or no one else is there to help you with this. And part of the reason is because the threat detection system keeps our stress hormones elevated, and this leads to extended hypervigilance. So we're just looking out for everything that can go wrong. We're irritable and we withdraw, right? The system for creating connections is actually your parasympathetic nervous system that allows you to feel connected and have like socially supported. And that actually also shuts down when the fight or flight system takes over. So now this is the final question about the mental aspects. How is your thinking impacted? So people say cloudy, forgetful, it shuts down. Foggy, hard to concentrate, can't focus. Hard to focus, yep. Shattered thoughts, distracted, so very scattered, very stuck. And so to talk more about this, and someone talks about overanalyzing small things and the freeze response. So, oops. So when we're in a fight or flight state, blood leaves the brain. So it's difficult to think, take in information, to have empathy, and to connect with others. And this reduced blood flow to the brain impairs brain functioning, right? So when the mind is hypervigilant, we get fixated on the negative and what can go wrong. It's almost like an obsessive type of worry, and you can't actually see the positive. It's hard to feel hope, which is why I love the Nelson Mandela quote that says, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." It's a reminder that we have to turn on the neural networks for hope, which may seem really hard, but by the end of this workshop, it might seem more straightforward to you. Um, and so as a mind hacker, what I see is that brain activation affects the way that everybody thinks, feels, and makes decisions. So I think about the brain in three parts. What I call brain 1.0 is the system for self-preservation. It's tied to the amygdala, which is what turns on the freeze, flight, fight reaction. And when you're in this state, the voice in our heads, it sounds different. I call it an inner Godzilla because like Godzilla, you just kind of smash things or want to disappear. And it may feel good to vent, but it doesn't actually make the situation better. And on the inside, we don't really feel like we want to cause harm, but we just feel overwhelmed. There's not enough money, there's not enough time to perform, to do all the things we need to take care of. And there's too much information for us to absorb. this does not feel good. So what most people do is they escape Brain 1.0 by going into what I call Brain 2.0, the system for reward and acquisition, which is your dopamine circuitry in the basal ganglia. And it makes you chase instant gratification and praise, right? And so people start to dig into comfort food, do retail therapy, drink away their worries, or they chase status or achievement, ways to feel good by earning self-worth. And so the voice in our heads in this state, I call it an inner teen wolf because it's very competitive. It thinks about what's in it for me, how can I get myself forward, and it's very driven about um, accumulating what we think of as scarce resources for ourselves and our loved ones. And when we're in this state, what we feel like internally is that we have to chase things. There's a fear of missing out that makes us chase carrots. We think we need to be happy, to be safe, to survive. And we can't question whether, or we don't question whether we're chasing the right things. We just believe what society tells us our carrots should be, and we just chase them. Now, it's a tunnel vision mode in that once we get the carrots, um, before we get the carrots, it's almost like all or nothing. I better get these carrots. And then once you get it, there's a short-lived type of thrill before you feel empty again. And then you chase something else. The fear of missing out keeps coming back. And on a long-term trajectory, even though there are a lot of successful people who live in Brain 2.0, they're not actually happy. And we've had great examples recently of people like Michael Phelps, Tiger Woods, who are on top of the world, and yet their lives still fell apart because Brain 2.0 makes us pursue happiness. It doesn't actually allow us to experience happiness. And so when we live in Brain 1.0 and 2.0, stress, we're very reactive to stress. We don't have a sense of how to regulate it, to master these systems until we recognize that when we're in 1.0 and 2.0, we're basically being mindless and unconscious. And then we have to make an effort to become mindful and conscious by activating what I call Brain 3.0, which are your systems for well-being and mastery. It's tied to your prefrontal cortex, and it allows you to have executive functioning, this ability to be self-aware, to self-regulate, to focus, to plan. And as you notice, when I asked you about what happens in a crisis to your mental capacities, you say it shuts down. And that's because the freeze, fight response specifically draws blood away from Brain 3.0. It deactivates it. So you lose most of your ability, your higher order abilities when Brain 3.0 doesn't get enough blood flow. And that's a shame because when we're in Brain 3.0, the voice in our head sounds different. To me, it sounds like an inner sage because it allows you to access your inner wisdom and it allows you to see the bigger picture, take a long-term view, to see beyond immediate gratification. It allows you to regulate your urges and impulses. It allows you to see how things interconnect, to look at systems and structures, to depersonalize the way we see our stories, to be able to step back and see your narratives. In Brain 1.0 and 2.0, you unconsciously absorb and believe everything society tells you. That ability to step back and say, hey, the way that things are may not be what the way things should be, that comes from being in Brain 3.0. And so when you design, I would imagine you're just much more creative when you can calm Brain 1.0 and Brain 2.0. And the insights that come, the creative breakthroughs that come in Brain 3.0 are amazing, right? And so I think from a creative perspective, it's like, how do we learn how to master our fear and our need to chase rewards so that we can connect to this inner creative flow, right? And that's an important part of the creative mindset, is that space where in that tranquility, in that calm, just beautiful insights arise that we manifest through whatever our mediums are. And I'm also an artist. So for me, when I'm in 1.0 and 2.0, I can't really draw or do anything creative. It's when I'm in 3.0 that it flows out. And so the important thing to recognize is that our social conditioning, our trauma, our oppression, it all gets internalized by Brain 1.0 and 2.0. And so experiences of pain and loss, punishment and blame, ostracism, powerlessness, poverty, and stigma, all of that gets encoded into Brain 1.0. And these negative experiences are unpleasant, so we try to avoid experiencing these things again. At the same time, when we experience positive things like pleasure and gain, prizes and praise, popularity, power, privilege, and status, that gets encoded into Brain 2.0. These are pleasant experiences, and we crave more of these, and thus we chase them. And to some degree, if you think about our society and what society tells us or helps us associate with Brain 1.0 and 2.0, in the context of white supremacy, we've been told that white culture and whiteness is a positive, and we get rewarded by conforming to this mainstream culture. And we get punished for diverging from the mainstream culture, for expressing non-whiteness. And those of us who are people of color, many of us have been in some form penalized, discriminated against, or marginalized just because we're not white. And oftentimes, if you look at the media, movies, these images that we see of the portrayal, the representation of non-white people are very stigmatizing, very marginalizing. And so for a lot of people, we either associate those negative images with Brain 1.0 whenever we see someone of that group. And unfortunately, even people of color internalize those same negative narratives about ourselves, right? And so it's important to understand that these become stories and narratives that we have to examine in Brain 3.0 and can cause a lot of unnecessary stress if we do not take the time to free ourselves from these narratives. And so I want to now talk about my own journey from Brain 1.0 and 2.0 to Brain 3.0. So those of you who know me know that I was born in Vietnam and became a refugee as a baby. My parents escaped from Vietnam when I was 6 months old. I nearly died through the journey from the boat to the refugee camp. Lots of different diseases, lots of malnutrition, bouts of starvation. It's a pretty terrible time. And then I was lucky that we were resettled in Philadelphia, got to start over in America, but we did have to learn how to navigate inner city Philadelphia, how to navigate poverty, racism against refugees, violence towards refugees, because so many times people have xenophobia. They don't want people who are different or new to come into their neighborhoods. And so because of that, and then growing up in an African-American neighborhood and watching and learning about white supremacy and anti-Black narratives through my friends and my classmates and the impact on them was pretty devastating as well. So I decided at a young age, I needed to figure out how to navigate and create better tools to deal with this adversity and all of these barriers, and maybe one day be able to come back to the inner city and make a difference. So I focused on the path forward that became clear to me was academics. And so I was so gifted that I got into Harvard College, but it wasn't a fairy tale ending. The culture shock and alienation I experienced at Harvard led to all of these traumas resurfacing, right? And not having a social support network, not having any mentors or role models as a first generation college student. I had to learn how to navigate such a different culture, and the sense of superiority and elitism in the Ivy League, in the ivory tower, was very repulsive to me, actually. And so for me, once all these mental health issues rose to the surface and were beyond my control, I had to seek help. And that's when I began to see a psychiatrist. He gave me medicines, explained their mechanisms of action. And I was like, hey, if changing my brain can make a big difference through drugs, how can I work on ways to change my brain without drugs, right? How do I get into these underlying patterns that I had absorbed, the lack of coping mechanisms, the lack of positive ways to handle toxic stress, right, that I had to teach myself. And so I began to examine a lot of the narratives that I'd grown up with and began to free myself from those narratives and create new patterns, rewire my brain in a completely different way. And because of that, I was able to graduate with honors, ended up going into the business world in management consulting, went to Wharton, got into private equity and social impact investing. And through that, my goal was to build skills that I could use to then change the world as a social entrepreneur. And so once I paid off all my student debt, I decided to focus on a bigger purpose and took some time off to learn what that purpose was. And the soul searching I did led me to India, where I learned about meditation and tried to tie those benefits to the neuroscience that I was also reading. And as a result, I created Calm Clarity, as Laura explained, as a social enterprise to illuminate social challenges, heal trauma, foster genuine inclusion, and address unconscious bias and inequity. And as I was building that and working with first generation college students, I realized that the needs were much greater than what I was offering, that they needed to have access to more mentors, more role models, more support to navigate college so that they could achieve their academic and career aspirations. And so we formed a new nonprofit that rallies professionals across the greater Philadelphia area to mentor, to volunteer, to support first generation college students. So if this is something that's of interest to Creative Mornings, and we do have a number of students who are interested in creative professions, and I think one of our students is actually here. I'm going to say hi to Anusha. And you know, I think it's a wonderful way of paying it forward, especially in jobs or career fields where there isn't as much representation, to try to open doors to people who may not have a clear pathway because they don't have mentors and role models to show them the path. So that said, it took a long time to learn how to manage Brain 1.0 and 2.0. It wasn't obvious. And a lot of times I still get triggered because of the traumas that I've had. And so I want to take a moment to talk about trauma. To me, trauma is a silent epidemic because it's so stigmatized, nobody wants to talk about it. The main effect of trauma is that it impairs the development of Brain 3.0. So in 2009, the CDC did a survey of almost 30,000 people, and most of them were well-employed people through the Kaiser Permanente network. And so 60% of them reported having one or more of what's called adverse childhood experiences, which is the scientific word for childhood trauma. And this could be verbal, physical, sexual abuse, domestic violence, having a family member incarcerated, mentally ill, or abusing substances, missing a parent because of divorce or separation. And so these ACEs are linked to a variety of adverse health outcomes in adulthood, including substance abuse, depression, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and premature mortality. And what the research has found is that there's a severe cliff where having 4 or more ACEs is defined as having severe trauma, where these physical and mental health conditions actually become very, very serious. And so they also found that high school attainment, going to college, can be impacted by whether or not you have 4 or more ACEs. And so as I looked at the Philadelphia data, because luckily there's a group who did an urban ACE study in Philadelphia, and they created this Philadelphia trauma map. What you see is that a lot of Philadelphia has experienced 4 or more ACEs. And these numbers are much higher than in the normal population that the CDC had surveyed. And so according to the CDC, when you have severe trauma, it's associated with lower educational attainment, higher substance abuse, addiction, depression, suicide, higher incidence of asthma, diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, and higher incarceration rates. And so to me, trauma and toxic stress, they compound existing inequities. And until we teach people how to heal the trauma and toxic stress, a lot of the urban issues we face may not get much better. And these, of course, contribute to continued levels of violence in the inner cities because people are not getting the healing that they need. And so I think it's very important to think about how toxic stress can trap people in Brain 1.0 and Brain 2.0. And so if you think about how people interact, if you have two people in 1.0, you're going to see unhealthy conflict or avoidance. When you see two people interact in Brain 2.0, it can be very transactional, where they just buy or sell or work together to fulfill their needs, or they compete with each other if it's a scarce resource. When you mix it up, there's domination or resentment, right? And unfortunately, because these are the parts of the brain that can't see their biases, people will deny, defend, or justify their biases in Brain 1.0 and 2.0. And so they can perpetuate bias and oppression because of that. Now, when people come together in Brain 3.0, it's different because Brain 3.0 fosters collaboration, innovation, and inclusion. So when people come together, there can be collaboration and creativity. And then when you're in Brain 3.0, you can be contagious about sharing that with other people because your brain is contagious. And so by interacting with someone in Brain 1.0, instead of them pulling you into Brain 1.0, if you provide empathy and compassion, you can help activate Brain 3.0 neural networks inside their brain. And then when you interact again with people in Brain 2.0, instead of competing or transacting with them, when you see them as a human being, when you tell them about your work, you can inspire them and support them to connect to something bigger than themselves, right? You can help them see a bigger picture, see how things interconnect, and they may be motivated to expand their horizons. And a lot of the greatest teachers, a lot of the greatest leaders were people who were able to do this. They could elevate people into Brain 3.0 and change the way they see the world. And what's important about Brain 3.0 is that it enables us to observe, understand, and change structural and individual biases. So if you look at it, if you zoom out a little bit, to me, inclusion means that people of all backgrounds are able to contribute as their best selves in Brain 3.0. And when we're in Brain 3.0, our minds are open. Our minds are open to learn, to grow, to be changed by others. When we're in Brain 1.0 or 2.0, we're not open. We're chasing things, or we're contracting to protect ourselves. We can't evolve when we're in Brain 1.0 and 2.0. So I hope that makes sense. And the fact that our society is structured such that such a large part of the population by default has to be in Brain 1.0 because they can barely get their needs met to survive. They're not getting safety, security. They don't have stable income, stable housing, stable food. I mean, that's not going to allow them to be in Brain 3.0 very easily. And then you have another large part of the population in Brain 2.0 running the rat race, thinking about what they need to attain in order to achieve more status and survive in a world of scarcity, right? And so sometimes we have to reimagine what the world looks like so that more people can be in Brain 3.0. And part of this is also individual versus structural. There are people who, no matter what the environment throws at them, have learned how to bring themselves and ground themselves in Brain 3.0. People like the Dalai Lama, like Mandela, like Martin Luther King, like Gandhi. And so we can do more to bring ourselves in Brain 3.0, despite whatever the external circumstances are. But we are not isolated from the external circumstances. And I think we all have a responsibility to reimagine and redesign institutions so that they enable more people to be in Brain 3.0. And so coming back to the quote that was shared, this is also one of my favorite quotes. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. When Viktor Frankl said this, he was talking about surviving the concentration camps of the Holocaust, right? So these are very severe circumstances of trauma and toxic stress in which he was able to remain in Brain 3.0. And so he's talking about how to choose growth and freedom, right? And to do that, we have to notice and hold space when Brain 1.0 and 2.0 are triggered, and then intentionally activate Brain 3.0 to respond with wisdom and compassion. This is not easy to do because when 1.0 and 2.0 are triggered, we just want to move and act and do something right away. But we can't hear our inner sage if we listen to brain 1.0 and 2.0. We have to hold that space to activate brain 3.0. And so I'm going to walk through a diagram how to do that. So I think about this horizontal axis of noticing when you're feeling negative or positive, but I also overlay it with a vertical axis of noticing when you're being mindless and unconscious versus mindful and conscious. And then this bottom left-hand quadrant is when brain 1.0 is driving us. The bottom right hand is when brain 2.0 is driving us. And then this top, both the left and right, is when we're in brain 3.0, able to accept both the negative and the positives that life throws at us. The issue with being in brain 2.0 is that we don't want to be in brain 1.0, so we escape. We're unable to hold space for the negative. We are unable to deal with life as it is. We think things should be different. And because of that attachment to brain 2.0, to being always in a positive state, we're unable to deal with the underlying problems that bring people into brain 1.0. This need to be comfortable, this inability to sit with being uncomfortable, keeps the world from changing. Once you learn to be in brain 3.0, to hold that discomfort, to face the things that trigger brain 1.0, we'll be able to change those things instead of running away from them. So by noticing when brain 1.0 or 2.0 are triggered, simply noticing that activates brain 3.0. So it just means that, you know, your inner sage is watching and aware that, hey, that's not me talking, that's brain 1.0 and brain 2.0 talking. And then by realizing that, you can further activate brain 3.0 and tune into the voice of your inner sage. And that can reduce your reactivity. But it's that discernment, that willingness to wait and see, maybe those voices in my head aren't telling me to do something that's constructive, right? And maybe I need to wait and tune in to the voice of the inner sage in order to, before I take any action. And so I'd like to now guide you to a simple meditation to do this. So we'll start by anchoring in the present moment using what I call a 6-3-6-3 breathing cycle. And that just simply means to inhale for 6 seconds, hold for 3 seconds, exhale for 6 seconds, hold for 3 seconds. We'll do that about 3 times. And then I'll guide you to observe and assess your brain activation by scanning your body sensations, your emotions, and thoughts, so you can assess whether brain 1.0, 2.0, or 3.0 are activated. So whenever you're ready, I would suggest you sit up straight in your chair, and you can do this with your eyes open or closed. If you're very sleepy, closing your eyes may lead you to fall asleep. Otherwise, it's a lot easier when you're a beginner to do this with your eyes closed. And so when you're ready, sit up straight in your chair. And I'm going to guide you all to exhale first. Now inhale slowly, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold 2, 3. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold 2, 3. Inhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold 2, 3. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold 2, 3. Inhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold 2, 3. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold 2, 3. Now normalize your breathing. So I'm now going to guide you to scan your body to sense whether you could be in brain 1.0, 2.0, or 3.0. So we're going to start with your feet. Bring your attention and your awareness to your feet from your toes all the way up to your ankles. And scan, do you feel any tension and tightness, or are your feet open and relaxed? Now bring your awareness up your legs through your lower legs to your knees, your thighs, your hips, and simply scan, is there any tension and tightness, or are your legs open and relaxed? And now bring your attention from your hips to your waist, your belly, up your back, up your spine, up the front, up your chest. And again, notice, do you feel any tightness or tension in your torso, or do you feel open and relaxed? And now bring your attention from your shoulders down your arms to your elbows, wrists, hands, and fingers. And again, notice, do you feel any tightness and tension, or are your arms open and relaxed? And now bring your attention to your neck, up to your jaw, your face, your cheeks, your temples, your forehead, to your head, the rest of your head. And notice, is there any tightness and tension in your neck, face, and head, or are they open and relaxed? And now take a moment to assess your emotional state. If you think about your emotional state on a scale of -5 to +5, where -5 is where you feel very negative, 0 is when you feel neutral, and +5 is when you feel very positive. Where would you place yourself on this scale? And again, it's about acknowledging where you are, what you actually feel, and not trying to force your emotions to be more appropriate or more optimal. And now look at your thoughts. What types of thoughts are popping into your mind? Do they sound like an inner Godzilla? Are they complaining, ruminating, worrying, beating yourself up, beating up someone else? That would be brain 1.0. Do they sound like an inner teen wolf telling you you got to do more, you've got to be somewhere else, you've got to be striving, working harder, planning, taking care of things? That would be brain 2.0. Or are they scattered, running around, daydreaming, escaping the present moment? That's also brain 2.0. Or are your thoughts allowing you to be open and present to the here and now, to whatever is arising? And that would be brain 3.0. This ability to step back and observe your thoughts and discern whether they reflect your inner sage, your inner Godzilla, or your inner teen wolf is called metacognition. This awareness of the way you think, the way you process and perceive, is one of the most important aspects of mindfulness. By being able to name it, to tame it, you become more equipped to handle your emotions and to step back from your thoughts and to realize that you're the observer. Your thoughts, emotions, sensations can arise and pass away without your getting entangled with them, without your being swept away by them. You realize that they're not you. You're the witness to what arises, and you can choose not to be swept away. You can choose to see them as neurons firing, activating a bunch of things in your mind, generating a lot of noise, But if you don't shake them up and keep energizing them, they can go quiet. So now slowly start to wiggle your fingers, wiggle your hands, wiggle your toes and feet. When you're ready, give yourself a nice big yawn. Ooh, nice big stretch. And then open your eyes. So if you want to chat, how do you feel? Loose, nice, carefree, centered. So unzipping my team wolf suit and wiggling out of it. That's a good one. Calm, still. So we have just mind hacked your way to Brain 3.0. And yes, it is energizing without giving you a sense of restless energy, which is much easier to harness to do creative projects. And so I wanted to give you time to do an exercise, a reflection exercise, if you have a piece of paper, to think about what in your life activates Brain 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. And so I've shared some of mine triggers here in the sense that, the things that bring me into Brain 1.0, a lot of it does have to do with racism, discrimination, injustice, being bullied or seeing people bullied and taken advantage of, financial stress, right? Not having enough money, when people criticize me, or when I feel like people are criticizing and rejecting me, which are two different things, doing badly, disappointing people, and, conflicts, arguments, relationship problems. Even if I'm not averse to conflicts, they're still very stressful. And then for Brain 2.0, sometimes I start binge watching shows and I can't stop. So I'll run through The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel in like a day, right? I'll run through some of the Star Wars movies in a day. Social media, getting likes gives you a lot of dopamine. It's very addictive. Food, it's comfort food for me, is chocolate and chocolate ice cream. Retail therapy, like I love good deals. I have realized that I'm just competitive by nature. And if I get started with something, if I don't win, I can be a sore loser. And then whenever people have awards, that are like bonuses and monetary prizes, it's very tempting to like apply for things that I don't actually feel like I'm a fit for, like accelerators and business plan competitions, just to win the money. But when I step back and think about what puts me in Brain 3.0, a lot of it is, for me as an introvert, very reflective. So journaling about my experiences, listening to music, or sometimes just doing a happy dance, learning about something interesting, supporting a cause that's important to me, being there for a loved one, drawing or doing something creative is very important to me. Meditation, yoga, exercise, and other forms of self-care. When I develop a skill or get better, I wouldn't say that I've mastered anything, but getting closer feels good. Making a difference in someone's life, and hiking and spending time in nature. So those are things that work for me. And as you can see, these are not, rocket ship type stuff, right? It's accessible. A lot of things that center and balance you are things you've already done that bring you into Brain 3.0. And so I highly recommend taking time to build this so you can recognize in everyday life when something is triggering you. So would anyone like to share things that bring them into Brain 1.0? And then we'll walk through to 2.0 and 3.0. So let me figure out my chat box again. So 1.0, the news, definitely. Mansplaining, that's frustrating. Anyone else wants to share? So 3.0 is yoga, yes. So let's move to 2.0 then. What are the things that bring you into 2.0? Sleep not getting enough sleep does make me an inner Godzilla the rest of the day. So I agree with that. So for 2.0, social media for sure. And it's designed to do that. They actually did their best to activate your dopamine system. Online shopping, yep, and all the ads that pop up about getting a better deal. Striving to achieve society's norms, yep. For overachievers, 2.0 definitely drives us to, feel more worthy. Being right. Hate readings, our guilty pleasures. Being recognized and praised. There are a lot of people who chase pleasing people and getting validation and affirmation by being a good girl, being a good boy, getting prizes. And so let's talk about 3.0 then. Besides yoga, what else brings you into 3.0? Cooking, yep. Swimming, helping your children, singing. So I imagine for creatives, creative work, when it's coming from your soul, can bring you into 3.0, and other forms of creative work that may feel like you're doing things for clients might not actually bring into 3.0. So being outdoors, just doing nothing and resting, volunteering, so checking things off your list, feeling a sense of accomplishment, unplugging, traveling, mindful walking for many people can ground them as well. And so as you see, a lot of these things are not that expensive, right? It doesn't cost a lot to be in Brain 3.0. It's more like shifting your intentions. And sometimes the things that, like the same behavior can be 1.0, 2.0, or 3.0, right? Depending on your motivations and feelings as you do it. So for instance, buying Christmas presents. You could do it out of fear. You can do it out of trying to be competitive and get the best gifts, or you can do it out of love and try to give something thoughtful and not necessarily get the toy fads that are selling out quickly, right? So again, you can't really tell from people's behaviors if they're in 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, but you can tell from the way you interact with them, their presence, whether they're in 3.0, if that makes sense. So to continue, so to help the world develop more Brain 3.0 so we can transform society, the creative projects I've been working on are 3 new online courses. So the first course that is now being user tested is called 3 Critical Skills to Navigate Crises. And then I've been filming a Mind Hacker's Toolkit to Calm Anxiety, which includes 10 techniques to soothe an anxious brain. And then a course to deconstruct unconscious bias using neuroscience and mindfulness to explain how, by understanding what we've associated with Brain 1.0 and Brain 2.0, allows us to understand structural biases and systemic oppression, and allows us to be more effective at implementing anti-racist policies and building anti-racist institutions. Because it's one thing when people talk about the need for these things, but until you can disentangle Brain 1.0 and 2.0 from white supremacy and our social conditioning, a lot of times we end up perpetuating these things inadvertently. So it's important to be able to deconstruct our unconscious biases. And so to wrap up, I'd like to ask people to answer 3 questions, or actually 2 questions, and then you ask me questions. So the first question is, what did you find useful? And if people can share in the chat, I'd appreciate that. Oh, thank you, Orly. Yeah, I would love to do work with the city of Philadelphia. I don't know who to talk to. All of this to clear stages, yes.
I actually can connect you to somebody.
Okay, great. Yeah,
So offline, yeah, we should connect.
wonderful. I'm glad you appreciate my slides. You can see my background as an artist come through there. The trauma map of the city, yeah, that's from the Urban ACEs study. So, oh, I'm glad I gave you a light bulb moment. All right, so then the next question is, what stood out most to you? And feel free to share, if I can get 3 volunteers at least to share verbally instead of just chatting. I think that would be fun. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I can say something about the one piece that really stood out for me is, and it's actually, I'm not surprised to hear it, but it was so, you said it in such a clear way, this idea that we've been going at reducing violence all wrong. That instead of, and of course now in this particular time when police violence is at its highest and all the conversations, but no one is talking about this, which is, it's not just about reducing the violence, it's changing the brain construct and being able to understand empathically what's going on with people who've had multiple traumas, and we expect them to somehow suddenly become different people without any guidance or support. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I hope it's more obvious now that we have to provide more healing and not more punishment. Anyone else want to share?
I think it's really interesting. It's hard to listen to this talk out of the context of where we are right now politically. No matter where you stand and who you support or whatever road you choose, it's just hard to, it's enlightening and hard to listen to this in context of where we are right now politically and where we are in this world.
Yeah, I hope that one day we can help shift the politicians into Brain 3.0.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. One more share?
I can go. So I think what's one of the most fascinating things about this and what stood out most for me is through and kind of what Rose was saying, without the context of what's happening right now, especially how reflective we all have to be and in touch with our own mental health, this really creates this visual connection, at least the Matrix did, on where did I fall throughout this 9-month period and where will I be moving forward. And I think if you were to ask your first question about stress in March, everyone would have said very high. And you had made a comment about everyone seems like they're being very resilient. And I think that's really key on how reflective and resilient we have become, and that there's this connection on this matrix and how I can put myself in these places of, oh, I was in 1.0 at this month. I have lived in 2.0 for the last 6 months. And right now I find myself trying to strive for that 3.0.
I appreciate your sharing that. Yeah, it's important. And that's why I wanted to tie it to the context of what's been unfolding in the larger world, and help us see, how we have been spending a lot more time in Brain 1.0 and 2.0 as a result of the increased level of stressors that have overwhelmed our past coping mechanisms. So, and then now I'm just open to people asking questions. I don't know if we've completely run out of time, but I can stay a little bit longer if people have questions.
think we have time for one or two questions. So if you are ready to ask a question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
By the way, this is Kabil Jim. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I had a question. So as you were writing your book and forming your thought leadership on this, what were some books that inspired you from the area of neuroscience and psychology?
So they're actually behind me on this bookshelf. I love Robert Sapolsky's work. So he wrote the book, Why Zebras Don't Have Ulcers, to help explain how human beings keep ourselves in brain 1.0 and 2.0 psychologically when other animals just shift in and out of these states because of actual danger. And then, Kelly McGonigal wrote a book, The Upside of Stress, Upside of Stress, to help us understand when stress can be a positive, because it helps us, if we think about the purpose of stress and how we can make the world a better place when we get challenged, and say yes to challenges instead of running away from them, right? And I think that the idea of the 10 and befriend response as a way of human beings overcoming what we're going through today, with all the community mutual aid programs and food banking and all that, it's an important way of building resilience to make a difference. And then I also loved Richard Davidson and Daniel Goleman, who wrote a book called Altered Traits about the neuroscience of meditation, which summarizes a lot of their other works. So I think that came out after my book was finished, but I think that one has a good summary of past books or what the research says. It's the most recent one, I believe, in terms of explaining the neuroscience of meditation. And of course, you can read books by the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, to go deeper into the original traditions that they've been studying through fMRI, brain imaging studies.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you so much.
Zwei, somebody had asked earlier in the chat if you use EMDR in your work.
I have experienced EMDR as a patient to heal my own trauma. I'm not a therapist, so I can't do EMDR. I can't treat people. And there's a disclaimer in all Calm Clarity workbooks and things like that we're not medical professionals. So, we can't give medical advice, but we can give you leadership programs. We can talk about ways to build more resilience, but we can't prescribe anything for people, and they should always talk to their doctors. That said, if you have acute stress, if there was some incident where your life was in danger, where you felt great fear, then I would say EMDR is an important tool, and I would suggest everyone try that for complex PTSD, for race-based trauma, which is much more, it's like just being exposed to toxic pollutants in the air, right? It's harder for EMDR. My perspective, I haven't been able to find EMDR effective for complex long-term types of trauma.
Thank you so much, Zwei. And I know there are a couple more questions coming in, but we've gone over time, and I don't want to keep going in that direction. So thank you so much for your time, all of your insights that you shared with us so generously. And clearly this is one of the talks that people are going to be looking to on the Philadelphia Creative Mornings website to listen to again and again. There's a lot there and a lot that we can all get out of that. So thank you, Zwei. Thank you to my fellow team members from Creative Mornings Philadelphia, and to everybody who joined us. Have a wonderful and calm and clarity-filled day.
Great, yeah, take care, and thanks for staying with me past 10 a.m. And I just put all of our social media info up in case you want to follow us. Every Monday morning, I send out a quote to help activate Brain 3.0. So you can sign up for our newsletter to get that quote, or follow us on social media to get those quotes as well. And I I invite everyone to co-create a collective shift into Bring 3.0. I think if you want to change the world, you can't really do much in Bring 1.0 and 2.0. You've got to bring yourself into 3.0 first to be a light in the darkness. So thank you.
Thank you.